Okay, so this is going to be a demonstration of making a quick, basic, easy map using ArcGIS. We're going to follow along roughly with the steps we talked about in the lecture on how to make a great map. So I'll talk through these as I walk through some of the process that I'm working on, and I may throw this back into the video to refer back to it. So the first thing we need to do is consider our map purpose and our audience. And I thought for this map we'd just make a map for the general public showing where the greenways are in Asheville. Greenways are a pretty hot topic right now, and a lot of people are excited about having more greenways and easy ways to get through the city without getting in your car. Many people don't think that we should spend the money on them, so it's a topic of interest to our community, and so it'd be good to have a map that shows where the greenways are. Okay, so the map purpose is a map showing greenways. The audience is the general public, so we need to come up with some GIS data to show this in ArcMap. One of the first things we need to do is collect our data. We happen to have a lot of Asheville data, of course. You could get all of this data from the City of Asheville Open Data Portal and some from Buncombe County. I've got some shapefiles I've downloaded. I've also got a geodatabase. Normally for a project, you try to get all of your data incorporated into a project geodatabase that you'll work with for this project. We're just going to say that our Asheville geodatabase is our project geodatabase in this case. And so the first thing we want to do after we find our data, collect some data, we've got a lot of data, is start thinking about the page size and the delivery format and the scale that you're going to be working at. So this is going to be let's say it's going to be a paper map that people can come grab and take from the planning department. If they're in the planning department asking questions, we want it to be printed on 8.5 by 11. We don't want it to be a huge map. We just want it to be a handout map, and maybe we'll put this map, we might export it also to a PDF or a JPEG and put it on the website as well. We might make it available to email to people and stuff like that if people have questions. So 8.5 by 11 is what we want to make this map on. So the first thing you should do is look at your page and print setup and make sure that you've got the right size map. All right. So we're going to go with letter size, which is 8.5 by 11, and portrait is telling us that it's a upright instead of landscape, which would be more horizontal. So you can see what the map's going to look like right here. We're going to tell it to use the printer paper settings. If you use this setting, you want to be careful. If you made a map here and you pointed to the plotter in the back of the room and you made it really big, like you changed the size to some really big piece of paper, if you kept that checked and you went home and opened this map, it's going to look at the printer paper settings on your default printer at home. And so it could make it shrink down to small size and scale all your data down. So if you're moving from one place to another and have different printers that you're pointing at, you want to be careful of that setting. It's usually fine if you're working on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and it's not as big a deal. Something else to consider, however, is that without that checked, you don't see the margins of the paper that you have to work with. Your printer margins, the paper margins, are based on your printer margins. So printers all support different margins on a piece of paper. And so if you don't have that checked, you won't see the printer margins. And you can probably barely see it. There's this little gray line that shows you the print margins, and we'll see that here when I click OK here. So I'm going to click OK and switch over here to layout view, and there's our page size. Okay, this is the the margin of the paper. And this is our data frame. Okay, we don't have any layers loaded in. You want to maximize your data and your page size as much as you can. But for now, we've come up with our page size. We know it's going to be a 8.5 by 11. And we're curious on this. We're not sure the scale of the data, but I know that I want to put all of the greenways on this map. So I'm going to, I don't see the greenways anymore. I'm going to unzip my greenways again. I don't know what just happened to them. Alright, so I just unzipped my greenways shapefile, and I unzipped it to the shapefiles folder. This is a good opportunity to reinforce the fact that ArcCatalog doesn't update really quickly. Okay, a lot of times people unzip files and they go over here to their shapefiles folder and they're like, well, where's my shapefiles? So if I look in my file explorer here and I go back to that same folder, it's like, I'm sure I unzipped that to my Asheville shapefiles folder, and you look in here, say, oh yeah, look, they're in here. There's my Greenway shapefile. Okay, so that makes up my Greenway shapefile. Why isn't it over here? Our catalog just didn't update when I unzipped it because that folder was already open. F5, select the folder and press F5 and it will update. Okay, so I'm going to grab my Greenways and drag them over here. All right, so we know we want to map on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If the person who told us to make this map or requested this map told us, I want to show all the greenways and I want it on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If you are required to do those two things, you don't have a lot of control over the scale of the map. So right off the bat, you can switch over here to our layout view. I can make this data frame as big as I can get it in the margin. Okay. And then over here in layout view, I'm going to look for my layout toolbar. It's down here. Okay, so I can zoom in and out on my data here, but really I want to zoom in as far as I can on these. So I want to zoom in as much as I can on the data. So if you look at this, you can see the scale is 1 to 124,138. This button will zoom to the full extent of the data. It's on the standard toolbar. It's going to change the scale. It's going to zoom in on the greenways as much as it will within the extent of that data frame. So if I do that, you see it zoomed in a little bit. 1 to 100,738. If I got that close, I would immediately try and see what it was like at 1 to 100,000, and that works. Okay, 1 to 100,000 is a nicer scale than 1 to 100,768. I mean, as far as what you're mapping at. So I mean, that is the process I go through often when I start making a map. I mean, I throw the data in on the page size I think I need, and sometimes you have more flexibility on the scale, on the extent and the scale. You can zoom in and out. Maybe they just, maybe they say, well, if we can zoom in more, we don't really need to see this one up here. I'd rather have more scale and exclude that one greenway. So you say, okay, so you zoom in a little bit more. But now you also have to consider you need room on this page for other stuff too, right? We need to put our scale bar and our legend and things like that. I'm guilty of trying to zoom in too much on some of my maps because the more you zoom, the more detail you can put on a map. The farther zoomed out you are, the less detail. On a lot of maps I make, I try to include a lot of information. So I'm constantly trying to zoom in as much as I can, and then I find myself with not a lot of room to put all that other stuff on. All right, so right off the bat, we need to put in the municipalities. Okay, they're the municipalities. I just drug them over. How about the French Broad River? That'd be a nice thing to have on the map. Let's make it something like that. How about just that? Okay. All right, so there it is, 1 to 100,000. Pretty quickly, you want to give this to the person who you're making the map with or for, and say, hey, look, this is what it's looking like. 1 to 100,000. This is what we can fit on it. I could pan down a little bit, but right off the bat, the person may say, no, well, God, now that I see it, the whole city of Asheville really needs to be on the map. So this is back and forth with the people you're working with to make the map. You want to keep them in the loop and show them this early on. You don't want to do a ton of work before they're going to need to see it to know what is best. All right. So how else? So what else? All right. So we're working to get our extent and our scale done. Now we need to do more preparation of the data. Okay. We need to think if we need to add any information to it. Is this good enough for the greenways? I don't know a lot about this greenways layer. Maybe we should open the attribute table and better understand it. Or maybe I show it to the person and they say, well, those aren't all greenways. I really wanted to show whether it was a existing greenway or a proposed greenway. So say, okay, well, is there information in the table for that? Yeah, it is in here. So it's under the segment type field. I'm not sure why it was named that. I've mentioned this before. We oftentimes get data from someone else. They built it. That field name makes a lot of sense to them, or maybe it doesn't. But so we can symbolize this data whether it's proposed or existing. Okay, so what other information might be useful to have on this map? How about maybe primary roads? Primary roads might be good. Let's turn it off for now. And I'm going to go on and symbolize the greenways. Right, so on the symbology tab, we can symbolize the data based on non-numeric attributes or numeric attributes. That greenway or proposed greenway is a non-numeric categorical kind of thing. So I want to symbolize it based on that field of segment type. And I want to add all the possible values that attribute field has. There's only two. There's greenway and proposed greenway. So if I click add values, there they are. All right, the greenways, I don't know, thicker green line makes sense, huh? All right, and the proposed, I don't know what color to make proposed. How about a pink? It's thinner pink. So you can see right here the count. There's 26 lines that make up proposed and 118, or 26 that make up greenways, 118 that make up proposed. That doesn't necessarily tell you that there are 26 greenways. A greenway may have many segments to it in the database. So that doesn't give you an exact idea of how many total there are. So if you were to add some data to this, if you were to draw in a new greenway, it would go in, it would be this all other values symbol if you didn't give it a value. So until you give a value, if you keep this all other values checked, it'll still show it on the map. Click OK to that, and it starts to give you an idea of the greenways. All right, a couple other things I was thinking maybe the parks would be nice to show, because greenways often connect parks. Let's do it from over here. I was adding data here, but I've got my catalog window open here, so I'll just add the parks too. All right, there are the parks. Let's make the parks some kind of other, maybe a green symbol too. We could search for park. Okay, now this is changing all the symbols in parks to make it look like something else. Now something like this, when there's this many on the map, it's going to be too much, probably. It's a little, just not really easy on the eyes with all those little symbols like that. I don't ever use symbols like that unless there are only a very few and they're not close to each other. In this case, yeah, I think I'm just going to go back to maybe just a circle. I'll make it green, dark dark green and smaller. I don't like the little symbol. I don't want an outline on it, so something like that starts to look good. Municipalities, I think they'd look good with more of a beige color. And I don't really want that line on it either. So you got to start to symbolize your map. Make it look like what you want. Alright, let's go back here to the primary roads. Let's also symbolize this by categories. There's a field in here. Now, before you start symbolizing, you really always have to open up the table and kind of figure out what you want to symbolize by. This route type text 1 field shows whether it's an interstate, a U.S. highway, or a U.S. interstate. So state highway, or federal interstate. I don't know why they called it route type text 1 either, but it's pretty obvious to me what's in that field. So I could use it to symbolize by categories, route type text 1, add all those values. I'm going to make my interstates a thick red line. U.S. highways is alphabetical here. U.S. highways in the hierarchy of the road system are actually above state highways. So let's push it up. U.S. highways on maps are usually a thicker, bigger symbol than the state highways. And we'll just make those 1, and make it kind of a gray. And we can build this hierarchy of our symbology. Now, when you're making maps like this, this button right here on the layout toolbar is a really useful button to know about. It shows you what the data should look like printed on normal size. Okay, that zooms to regular scale like it would look printed. With this, to you projected on this screen, it looks bigger than it looks to me on my screen. To me, it's like, you know, a third smaller than an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. Do I have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper? So yeah, it's about half of an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, right? So looking at this, it makes it hard to tell what it's going to look like printed. So you zoom to 1:1, and it shows it better to me on this screen, not to you up here on the monitor. Okay, that it's way bigger than it's going to look printed to y'all, right? So the 1:1 is really good because, especially when you're making a really big map. If this map was 30 by 30, and I was looking at it on this little screen and it was this big, I mean 30 by 30 is this big. So zooming 1:1 really gives you a feel for what the symbols and all look like. All right, so let's what else should we do? Let's label a couple of things real quickly. We don't talk about this much in the PowerPoint, but it's worth mentioning in this discussion on this demo. We will often label things the same way that we use our attribute information to symbolize the data. We use these attribute values to symbolize things differently. We can also use the attribute values to label features. So there's a labeling toolbar that's turned on. If you right click here, you see all the toolbars. You can also go to customize and see toolbars. There's a lot of toolbars for ArcMap. You can turn on toolbars for things you don't even have a license for. So if you don't have a license for something like Spatial Analyst, you can still turn on the toolbar, but it's grayed out. If you have an extension, you also have to go under extensions and turn them on. See, we have licenses for all these, but it'll be grayed out if the extension is also, if you have it but don't have it turned on. So there's a labeling toolbar. That is not an extension that you have to purchase. That comes with any license level. And you should always use what's called the Maplex label engine. Okay, the Maplex label engine is an advanced labeling engine that you have to turn on to use. It used to be an extension you paid for, but then they built it into the software. So, with labeling, you can look at the label manager, and in here you have the option to label every single layer in your map. I want to label parks. Every layer has a default set of label properties set up. What this is going to do, if I click that checkbox right there, it's going to label by the facility field, Arial 8 black. It's going to position it the best place it can around it based on other features, and there's a whole slew of other properties in here. But by default, there's some operations. So if I just click apply here, there they are. All right. So that's okay. That's a lot of parks. So really, it's kind of hard to read them. You can make a label down to 6 point and it's still readable. Maybe even 5 in a pinch. So that makes them fit a little bit better. We could do something like we could change the symbol. We can edit it, and we can mask the background of it with what's called a halo. And this halo, if we make it the same symbol as what's behind it, which is the city of Asheville, see how the label is going to have that kind of beige halo around it? You'll see they kind of cut through the roads and things, and so they show up better, but it obscures other things. So, you know, it really obscures a lot of the greenways. I think I'm going to turn those off. I don't think they're really appropriate for this map, and I think they obscure the greenways too much. Okay? All right, so one thing we could label, let's, you know, I think the roads obscure the greenways too much as well. I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to make this a, I'm not going to make it 1, I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to make it 1.2, and I'm going to make it a gray, not like a darker gray. So the interstates are that darker gray. The U.S. highways, I'm going to make them even smaller and a lighter gray. Okay, and so you start to see that now they don't obscure the map as much, since the greenways are the real point. Now, I'm thinking that, you know, we're zoomed 1-to-1 here, so I think the greenway should be a little bigger. It's, again, hard for y'all to tell because you're looking at it projected really big, so it looks bigger than it does to me. I'm going to make those a little thicker, and I'll make the proposed thicker too. I'll make them both too, so they stand out. Ooh, that's too much. All right, so you work and you spend some time to get your data symbolized and labeled like you want. I do think I'll label the greenways. Let's see if we can get them labeled. So your greenways, let's do it by the, it's the no, it's not. I'm not sure what it is. Let's go look and see what it is. Let's see what there's a greenway name in this table. So, all right, there they are. So I don't know why some say complete and other priority, but let's just do it based on this because there's a lot of names in here. So let's do it by that field. Is that it? All right, so you can have it follow the lines. There's these different placement techniques. On something like a greenway, street placement would probably work well. It optimizes it for being like a road name along a road. I don't want it to be straight. I want it to curve with the road. All kinds of different stuff you can change. And let's just see what that looks like. Doesn't look like anything. I didn't check that box to tell it to actually do it. I changed some of these settings, but I didn't check that box. All right. So now we've got some stuff going there. These would probably be better to do with some halos and stuff, and I'm not going to spend too much time on some of these concepts in this demo, but just kind of brush over some of the things you can do here. All right, so if we go back to our basic building a great map steps, we've got our data and got it in ArcMap and set our page size and determined our scale. We've adjusted the order and symbolized stuff. We're in layout view. we need to arrange everything on the page and add some supporting elements. So let's do that. So zoom out here. All right, we need to, there we go. All right, so we need a title, a scale bar, indication of text. Under the insert drop down, I can insert all these things. Let's do scale text. This is a, that didn't put in what I thought it was going to. 1 inch equals 1.58 miles. That's a verbal statement of scale. I will oftentimes put that in. I also put on my maps, I usually also put an absolute scale or a representative fraction, which I clicked there. I don't know why it didn't put that in. There. Oh, I clicked the wrong one, I guess. So this map, 1 inch equals 1.58 miles. That is 1 to 100,000. Let's also throw in a scale bar. Pick whichever one you like. That is equals 4 miles. Let's make it equal 2. Make sure if you change these things around that you don't leave it at 2.4 miles or something like that. You can change the intervals and all how this stuff works, and you should, to make it where there's not overlap like that. We're not going to mess with that in this. I'm going to move these over here. And I'm going to insert a title. Asheville Greenway map. There it is. I can double click it and change it if I want. Something like that. Change all this stuff about it. All right. Now, let's look at inserting a quick scale bar or north arrow. Got all kinds of choices. Pick one you like. Pick one that fits well on the space you have. Don't make it huge, really big. North arrows are kind of a pet peeve of mine. You don't need a huge one. And it's going to always be bigger than you think when it gets printed. Finally, let's insert a legend. And by default, it looks at all the layers in the map and it puts them all over here. Okay? Anything that's turned on. I'm going to click next and just scroll through some of this. You can change the number of columns it puts it in. You can change the title, the size, the font, the color. You can give it a border, background, drop shadows. You can change the symbols. If you want a municipality to look like an urbanized area in the legend, you can tweak other things in here. You can change the distance beside the symbols in your legend. When I finish, here's my legend. Okay? It's kind of big. I can actually just make it smaller. And this is where it starts to get useful to look at it at 1:1, because you're like, well, how small can it go? Well, if I zoom to 1:1, I can get a better idea of what that actually looks like, and I can read it fine here. I know it looks bigger to y'all up there. So you start to have your map done here. Now, the legend says just what it does in here. Primary roads, I don't need these other values, so I'm going to turn that off here in my symbology tab, and notice it's going to go away here, and it's going to go away here. If you have something named something weird, you can change it. Highway class. And this doesn't change it in the data. It just changes it here in this map, and it updates here. Okay, it's a dynamic legend. If I decide I want the French Broad to be a little bit darker, notice the legend updates along with this. So the legend is dynamic. Okay, and that's a good thing. If I added a new layer, it would get added to the legend. You often want to spend some time renaming things so that they, in the table of contents here, Again, it does not affect the data. You want to rename things in here because it renames them here, and that looks better in your legend. Okay. Now, sometimes people don't think they have good enough control on the, and I'm not sure why that, oh, segment type. Yeah, see, I could just delete that altogether and turn off the other values and make that look a lot better. Okay, it's making that legend look a lot better, right? Now, if you want to move individual parts of this legend around, you can if you convert it to graphics and ungroup everything. You can have fine control over every little element in there. Once you do that, it's not connected to your map anymore. So if you add a new layer, it doesn't get added to the legend. If you change a color, it doesn't change in the legend. So I often do convert my legends to graphics, but at the very end. It's really easy to add a new legend in, though. I mean, you hit that insert legend, next, and then you can just grab an item out of that by converting it to graphics too. But it's usually one of the last things I do. All right. Okay, so we've added most of that information. You know, we could insert a picture if we had the city of Asheville's Greenway logo. We could insert their logo. We could insert text. We should insert at least a date and an author. Text comes in right there. What is it? 1/28, 2018, something like that. Nice. No one's ever going to see this. But yeah, so you know, you could put in, we've got some room around here, you know, so you know, I'd start to think about maybe putting in a little paragraph off of the Greenway's website describing the Greenway program for the city of Asheville. Maybe, you know, if you absolutely have no space, I wouldn't. If I've got a big chunk of white space that could use some filling, you want to work for visual balance in your overall map. You want the greenways to pop out. You want the other information to kind of fade to the back. I think the parks are a little bit annoying. I might make them a little bit lighter color. They pop a little bit too much, I think. That might do too much too. You know, coming up with a kind of a subdued color that they don't pop out as much. They're not really the purpose of this map, but it's nice to show where the parks are. You want to be really intentional in what you do. You want to, it is very easy to have a map that just doesn't convey the information well that you want to get across, because you as the map maker, you know the map's about greenways and you know which one's the greenway layer. So to you, it's obvious to you what you're doing. But you really want to have other people look at a map, think about it from someone else's viewpoint. All right, so we talked about focusing the data frame. Focusing the data frame is by clicking this button right there. It focuses it. When you have that hatching pattern, that means it's focused. Okay? So remember how to focus the data frame. If I wanted to delete a park out of here, I would need to have it focused during an edit session to do that. We'll see that again during the editing demo this semester eventually. But you know, that's a pretty quick and easy map. The one other thing we didn't talk about is storing relative paths and the default geodatabase. So under your map document properties, under the file drop down, you should store relative paths to data sources. And what that does is, if your map and your data, I'm going to save this map first. I'm going to save my map. I'm going to save it to this folder with all this other data in it. So it's on my S drive, GIS courses, GIS data, Asheville. This is my Greenway map, MXD. Okay? It is in this folder. It's in this Asheville folder with everything else. Okay? So, there it is. It's in that Asheville folder. Now, if you look at the data source for this data, it's looking for it on the server there. Okay? If I were to copy this Asheville folder, it's got a path to this data, and it says it's on the server upstairs. If I copied this whole Asheville folder to my flash drive and I went home and I double-clicked this map document, the map document path to the data is still looking up there. That's called an absolute path, pointing to the exact location. If I come in here to my map document, properties, and I store relative paths, it's going to look for the data relative to this MXD, relative to the folder structure it's all in together. So it doesn't matter if I take this Asheville folder that has the data that's in this map and the map document, if I take it home and I put it on my documents folder at home and I open this map, it's not going to say look for it on that server. It's going to say look for the data in this Asheville folder relative to where all the other data is. It's not going to look for it on that server. So it's the same thing if you come here and you plug your flash drive in and it's got your data on it, and these computers call it the E drive, and you save a map, and so it says the data's on the E drive, but then you go home and plug in your flash drive at home and it calls that flash drive a G drive. It'll break where the data is. The map will open, but you'll see red exclamation points up and down this, and you won't see any data on your map. So you have to go click one of those red exclamation points and tell it where the data actually is, because it thinks it's in one place, but it's been moved. So store relative paths. The other thing is to change your default database. Make your default database the database that you're working with in your project. So that if I can double click the right folder, I'm going to make Asheville my default geodatabase. So now if I were to say want to export a particular greenway out to its own layer. Let's just say that I wanted to create a layer of just the Hall Creek Greenway. That's the one I'm really want to, for some reason, I want to create a layer of just that greenway, and it's not in this map. Why is that? Well, for the sake of just keeping it moving here, let's do the this West Asheville Rails to Trails Greenway. If I wanted to make a layer of just that one greenway, so this is another good teaching moment about selections in ArcGIS, and we'll talk about this when we get to it. With all these overlapping layers, it can be hard to select one layer without selecting the polygon that's overlapping with it. You can go to the list by selection way of showing your data in your table of contents, and you can toggle whether a layer is selectable on or off right here. So I'm going to click that and make municipalities not selectable. So now I can click that and it's not going to select that underlying polygon because it's not selectable. But so we oftentimes will export data out of ArcGIS, out of ArcMap. We'll also often do geoprocessing that creates new data. Maybe create a buffer, it makes a new data set. When you do anything that creates new data, like geoprocessing or like exporting, it should, if I not saved it, it should point to that default geodatabase to make it easier to export and work with data like this. Oops. And for some reason the default database isn't working. Maybe we need to save it or something. So if I select, let's just see, data, export data. Huh. That's not operating as advertised. All right. It should be pointing to that default database. And oh, I didn't, for some reason it doesn't look like it got set. Wait a minute. Yeah, see, it didn't change. I don't know what happened there. So setting your default database should make it where anything you do outputs to that database. And Save, export. It's not changing. I don't know why. You'll see it does in your maps. Maybe, I don't know why this isn't working, but it normally does. So the default geodatabase, even though it didn't seem to work here, change that to your project database and set relative paths, especially if you work on different computers. It makes your projects more portable. All right. We often will we can directly out of ArcMap print this. I can send it right to a printer. Oftentimes, instead of doing that, we export to a PDF or a JPEG or something like that. I'm just going to call it Greenway Map, export, and we'll see what this looks like. Did it go to my... So this, you can view it just as a PDF. All right, and admittedly, it is not the best map ever, but you know, that's 20 minutes or less. It's not a horrible map for that kind of putting in that kind of time. Yeah, so just to show you another map I've been working on, just since we're talking about maps, it's worth giving you a quick look at a different one. Here is a map I've been working on just to show you the kind of text and a layer of level of layers that you often put on maps. This is a map in West Virginia, and it's not zooming in as much as I wanted, but so it should redraw and be a little more have higher resolution. It's not exported at super high resolution because I was sending it to the person I'm making it for their input, but you can kind of start to get a level of idea of how many layers go on a map and the type and the text and the symbols and all of that kind of stuff. This map is very much in draft mode. It's got a really simple legend on there I threw in there just so they could interpret what's on the map and so they could see the scale. This map will be eventually laid out outside of ArcGIS. What I just showed you was doing everything in ArcGIS. A lot of professional maps you see made will be laid out in some kind of layout design software like InDesign. And this map will eventually look something more like this with the legend, and it'll be built into a layout that'll have a title and a bunch of other information that helps support the map. This is Montreat Ridgecrest area, but you can see the kind of legends that you can build out outside of ArcGIS as well. But that's another example of not such that's not a really quick, simple map to make, but it's the same concepts apply to it. I wanted to show you a couple other maps that I've been working on kind of as of late. So, all right, thanks for listening.